FBI Director James Comey sent Congress a vague letter about newly discovered emails that may shed new light on the previously concluded investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Now, since then, he's faced a lot of backlash from both sides of the aisle. Comey said it was his obligation to update Congress because he testified in July that the investigation was complete. Now, the Justice Department and FBI are scrambling to process hundreds of thousands of emails before November 8th. There's a lot of different pieces of this puzzle. Political commentator and attorney James Goodnow joins us now to help us piece this all together. Welcome back, James.
Thanks for having me, Danielle.
The FBI Director, James Comey, sent his letter to Congress. Does this letter suggest anything in terms of new evidence?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Certainly there is some new evidence in the broad sense. We know that from the Anthony Weiner investigation, Huma Abedin, a top aide to Hillary Clinton, had emails that were sent to or from that device. Now, the existence of those emails alone constitutes the new evidence as we know it. And we know that because the FBI, through sources, indicates it didn't get a warrant to review the contents of those emails until Sunday. So the existence of them was the new evidence that prompted this letter that you referenced from Jim Comey to Congress.
So does the fact that they are reopening the case suggest that they did see something damning in those emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop?
Probably not. We know that within the bounds of the Anthony Weiner investigation, they were only permitted to look at emails relevant to that case, dealing with the allegations of Anthony Weiner sexting with minors, not relevant to the Hillary Clinton investigation and her private email server. So in order to stay within the bounds of what was permitted in the Anthony Weiner investigation, it's unlikely that the FBI looked at the contents of the emails related to the Clinton email server. That was at least until Sunday. Now we know from sources that the FBI is going through those emails in an automated process, trying to see if we have duplicates from the previous investigation.
Now that they've received that search warrant to sift through, what is it, like 650,000 emails, how long do we expect this part 2 of the investigation to take?
That really depends. It really depends on how many of the emails are new. So there's a two-step process the FBI is going through. One is they're doing this electronic search, and they're going to cross-reference the new emails with the old emails from the Hillary Clinton investigation from the summer. Of those that aren't duplicates, assuming there are any new ones, those would then have to be manually vetted to see, are these in fact emails that contain classified information? Do they pertain to the investigation? So really it's speculation at this point as to how long it will take. I think the one thing we know is that it's not going to happen before November 8th.
Okay. And speaking of speculation, James Comey is really the only one putting his name on his comments. Almost everything else is coming from anonymous sources. How do you factor in that when you're hearing conflicting reports from government sources who will not go on record?
I think you have to be very careful about what we're hearing right now. There's a lot of misinformation that's floating out there right now. We heard early on from reports that none of the emails were to or from Hillary Clinton. We now know that that's likely not true. We've heard that, as you referenced, there may be as many as 650,000 emails. We have no confirmation if that's true. The FBI is a large organization, and you have people who are partisan within it. Now we know that the players in the FBI and the Department of Justice aren't supposed to be trying to influence an election. In fact, that's against the law. But the reality is that the information, I think, has to be looked at critically and with a bit of suspicion at this point. All we know is what we've heard officially from Jim Comey. Everything else, I think, is anyone's guess.
And do you think that Obama's Justice Department is covering for Clinton?
That's a tough question. It really depends on the day. We know that early on, obviously, Republicans, conservatives were quite upset with Jim Comey based on his decision going back in July, saying that no reasonable prosecutor would carry forward with the case.
Right, and he was their whipping boy back then. He was their favorite whipping boy back then, and now kind of the tables have turned.
Right, exactly. Everyone's just kind of shifted sides here, and now Democrats are upset with Jim Comey. It's tough to know what's going to happen. I think my assessment is Jim Comey is a fair man. Does that mean he made the right decision here? I don't know about that. It is interesting. We know that The Attorney General under Bush 43, Alberto Gonzales, came out and said that this was an error in judgment on the part of Jim Comey. You have a lot of criticism coming from other Republicans, although most of it is coming from Democrats. This sort of move is unprecedented. It's unusual. But I think in light of the testimony that Jim Comey gave back in July, I think there are a few people who will question that he was motivated by a sense of doing what's right. Now, whether or not that ultimately ends up being the correct decision is a different question.
And let's look at Loretta Lynch for a minute, the Attorney General. She removed herself from the situation. She let Bill Clinton on her plane. How responsible is she for all this? And would we even be here had Lynch not allowed Clinton on that plane?
I think the Loretta Lynch, Bill Clinton tarmac meeting in Phoenix is largely a red herring here. We know that Jim Comey is aggressively acting on his own in a way that's really atypical for the head of the FBI. We know that the FBI's job is to gather evidence, and then ultimately it's the job of the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, to make charging determinations. So I think that really doesn't play into it. And as a matter of fact, we know that Loretta Lynch said that she would not suggest that Jim Comey release this letter and information about these emails, and Jim Comey nevertheless decided to pursue forward with it. So I don't think Loretta Lynch is ultimately responsible for it. I think Jim Comey is acting independently, and that may not be a bad thing. Now, if it turns out that there is something in these emails that's more than what we learned of in the past, and ultimately if charging determinations are warranted according to the FBI, at that point, having Loretta Lynch at the helm may not be appropriate, and I think a special prosecutor would come in at that point. But that is speculation right now. I think most of the reports we're hearing are that these are largely duplicative emails. But again, I think we're going to have to wait, and unfortunately, we're not going to get our answer on that before Election Day.
We'll just have to wait in suspense for that. One more question before we let you go. Harry Reid is accusing the FBI director of a federal crime. Why do you see this? Why haven't you seen this, any senators up for re-election using such heated rhetoric like he is?
Well, that's a big allegation to make against the head of the FBI. We know that Harry Reid is referencing, of course, the Hatch Act, which is a 1938 act that prohibits federal employees from using their positions to influence an election. Now, the question here that's really important is, what is the intent of Jim Comey? Whether or not this decision actually influences the election remains to be seen, although at least according to some polls, Washington Post poll today shows that it's had a pretty big swing, a double-digit swing in terms of going in Trump's camp. But whether or not Jim Comey had the intent to do that, I think is a stretch to say based on the information we have today. And I think because of that, you're seeing few Democrats who are coming out and really going as far as Senator Reid.
All right, we've just got a week until the election. The country is standing by in suspense. Attorney James Goodnow, thank you for weighing in.
Thanks, Danielle.